Hello there, kia ora, and welcome to Campaign Korero. This is a new series brought to you by election2026.co.nz because bad campaigns shouldn't be covered up by good media coverage. The aim of this show each week is to bring you a rundown, a summary of what's actually happened in the election campaign to keep you informed, because the general election is on November 7 and we want everybody to get out there and vote. But the more informed you are, the more likely your vote is to actually represent what it is that you want in the end. So the whole point of this is to make sure everybody is kept informed, which is what we try and do on that website. The show itself is going to be split into three parts. The first part is going to be taking a look at the headlines. What are the facts? What are the announcements? What's been put out there into the country over the last week for the campaign that you should be paying attention to? Then we're going to sit down and have a chat to an MP and talk to them about something specific that's been raised during the campaign in the week. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with an expert on one of the outcomes that's likely to happen with what's happened or been promised during the week. So it's a bit of an all-round view of everything that's been announced and everything that's going on. So if you want to keep up to date with this and get this every week, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So if you listen to this on podcast, it shows up in your inbox. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you at least know when to tune in. Right, now let's jump over and look at the top 15 headlines of things that have happened this week in terms of the election campaign. Finance Minister Nicola Willis announced a sweeping public service overhaul aimed at cutting 8,700 jobs and saving $2.4 billion over the next 4 years. The pre-budget plan relies heavily on departmental mergers, including the creation of a new super agency and expanded implementation of AI and digital tools to streamline customer-facing and back-office functions. Willis set a strict personal target to restore core public service headcount to a cap of 55,000 employees by mid-2029, though frontline workers like teachers, doctors and police are said to be explicitly excluded. Public sector unions and opposition parties responded with immediate condemnation, labelling the job cuts and AI reliance a threat to core services. Public Service Association representatives argued that removing thousands of experienced administrative roles would cripple departmental output and decrease service quality for citizens. Opposition spokespeople also raised concerns about data privacy and the lack of comprehensive ethical frameworks for introduced automated decision-making and AI tools into high-stakes government machinery. Education Minister Erica Stanford introduced a last-minute legislative amendment placing the Teaching Council under full ministerial control. The late-stage change to the Education Reform Bill replaces the current leadership framework with an entirely minister-appointed governance model, removing active teachers from holding mandated elected seats on their own governing body. Stanford stated the intervention follows independent reviews, citing a lack of regulatory focus within the council, though the move bypassed the traditional select committee consultation process. Frontline educators and primary teaching unions reacted with swift opposition to the surprise Teaching Council governance changes. The NZEI and PPTA teaching unions issued joint statements calling the plan a direct attack on the professional self-regulation and democratic oversight. Educational advocates argued that replacing peer-elected representatives with government appointees shifts the council from an independent professional standard setter to an arm of political directive. The National Party advanced a broad legislative strategy to curtail judicial discretion and alter existing legal interpretations across multiple sectors this week. Beyond Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith's core campaign policy to legislate a total ban on good character sentencing discounts for sexual offenders, the government drew intense focus for moving to amend statutory criteria to counter court rulings. This includes the controversial Marine and Coastal Area Takutai Moana Amendment Act, which explicitly tightened the threshold for customary marine titles following a Court of Appeal interpretation, as well as ongoing legislative changes regarding flexible funding and structural limits for disabled carers. The ACT Party advanced its regulatory reduction platform by issuing standardised guidance across all public sectors. Regulation Minister David Seymour and Attorney General Chris Bishop implemented joint statutory instructions to enforce compliance with the Regulatory Standards Act. The mechanism requires government departments to rigorously justify any bureaucratic red tape, serving as ACT's central campaign proof of concept for shrinking the state footprint. Labour Party leader Chris Hipkins confirmed the opposition will delay releasing its major campaign policies until after Budget Day. Speaking on Q&A, Hipkins noted that alternative platforms on fuel security, immigration and costs of living relief would remain under wraps to evaluate the government's official fiscal package first. Hipkins also defended the previous Labour government's fees-free university policy, characterising it as a vital workforce investment against the coalition's planned cancellation. The Green Party finalised its national candidate list hierarchy and launched an immediate nationwide grassroots campaign blitz. Co-leaders Marama Davidson and Chloe Swarbrick secured the top two rankings, followed immediately by sitting MPs Tiano Tuiono, Tamitha Paul and Julianne Genter to solidify organisational continuity. Following list ratification, volunteers initiated large-scale door-knocking drives and community meetings heavily concentrated in Auckland Central, Wellington Metro, Christchurch and Dunedin. Te Pāti Māori addressed a localised electorate fracture as sitting MP Maria Mino Kapakingi announced a regional breakaway candidacy. Kapakingi intends to contest the vital Te Tai Tokoro seat under a newly formed independent entity called Te Tai Tokoro Party. This development forces Te Pāti Māori strategists to split resources in the far north to protect the seat from both internal division and traditional Labour challenges. Te Pāti Māori leadership reaffirmed its commitment to contest all 7 dedicated Māori electorates, though, despite the regional split. President John Tamahiri locked in 5 formal candidates, anchored by prominent incumbent Hana Rafati Maipi Clark. The party also introduced political newcomer Hayley Maxwell, specifically tasked with running a high-intensity campaign to flip the historically Labour-held seat of Ikiroa Rafati. The National and ACT parties today announced their official support for New Zealand First's legislation Definitions of Woman and Man Amendment Bill. The surprise joint announcement ensures that the controversial Members' Bill, which seeks to legally define woman and man strictly by biological sex across all New Zealand legislation, has the required numbers to pass its first reading. Coalition leaders confirmed that while they are backing the bill to send it to the Select Committee stage to honour coalition agreements, individual party platforms retain distinct positions on the scope of the final statutory definitions. Human rights organisations, rainbow advocacy groups and opposition MPs reacted with intense criticism to the coalition's unified stance on the gender definition bill. Opponents argue that narrowing statutory language to exclude gender identity undermines existing legal protections for transgender, non-binary and intersex citizens under the Human Rights Act. Conversely, advocates for the bill, including groups like the anti-trans hate group Speak Up for Women, welcome the announcement stating that statutory clarity is necessary to preserve sex-based rights and single-sex public spaces. The Opportunities Party launched its Core 2026 platform focusing on targeted economic tax reform and regional development grants. Positioned outside of Parliament, TOP is centering its campaign on shifting the tax burden away from income toward residential land value alongside pitch investments for localised climate-resilient infrastructure. The party is pitching itself as a pragmatic, ideologically centrist circuit breaker for voters dissatisfied with the polarisation of the two major voting blocs. Local government bodies and outer-tier minor parties like New Conservatives have expressed growing friction over central policy directives. Local Government New Zealand, or LGNZ, raised concerns over the absorption of municipal portfolios into the new super agency, fearing a loss of regional autonomy. Simultaneously, smaller parties tracking under 1% in polling data, including the New Conservatives in South Auckland and the Outdoors and Freedom Party in the South Island, announced highly localised electorate candidate strategies to bypass national resource constraints. Combined mid-May polling data from Roy Morgan and Talbot Mills shows the major political blocs locked in a highly competitive race with volatile seat projections. Synthesised metrics place the right-leaning governing coalition and left-leaning opposition in a statistical dead heat. In party tracking, Labour fluctuates between 31 and 36% depending on the methodology. National holds between 29 and 30%, the Greens track near 9% and ACT sits at 7%, while New Zealand First moves between 11.5 and 14%, collectively modelling proportional MMP projections that border on a potential 60-60 parliamentary deadlock. Right, now let's cross over to Willow-Jean Prime and we'll have a chat to her about some of the changes that have occurred this week around it. Alright, kia ora, joining me now, I've got Willow-Jean Prime, Labour Party spokesperson for education, particularly around Māori education. How are you going today, Willow?
Kia ora, Paul. I'm doing okay today. It has been a very tough day with the Education and Training Bill going through its committee stage in the House. feeling for the sector and for all of those in education as this minister rams through even more legislation.
Yeah, one of the things that came up this week was a change around the Teaching Council, and there was the removal of elected members onto the Teaching Council and only having ministerial appointments to that. One of the other changes that hasn't been reported on quite so much has been the change of wording on what the council does. It's gone from having regard to policy to giving effect to government policy decisions. One of those decisions last year was the removal of te tiriti obligations in schools, which was not something that went down well with schools. We saw a huge number of them turn around and go, no, we don't want to do this. Is this change a way for the coalition to circumvent the will of the schools? And have they said that, or how do you think that this fits into giving effect to te tiriti in schools? How is that an important thing to see happen?
I think what we are seeing here is an unprecedented ministerial overreach and power grab into the teaching profession and sector. We saw that with the first proposals in the bill, the Training and Education Amendment Bill. And then at the last minute, we're seeing even further changes that are really concerning, where the representation of teachers is also being removed. This is the minister taking all the power and using every lever to make sure to force schools to follow her agenda and what the government wants our schools to be teaching, how they want them to be teaching it, and so on. What they give effect to and what they don't give effect to. Your question particularly about the last year's removal of the Section 127 obligation for school boards to give effect to te tiriti o Waitangi. The government did that undercover, by stealth, dropped it on us in the committee of the whole stage. There was no select committee process on it. There was no heads up to the public on it. And that was rushed through the House process. The backlash that the minister and the government received from that, overwhelmingly schools, communities, school boards voted to continue to honour te tiriti and their commitment to it. More than 75% of schools, they changed their language at the time. They said, oh, look, it'll be by choice. It'll be up to them if they want to do it. They're just no longer required to do it. That's not true. They were only changing that language as they saw the mood of the country respond. But now what we're seeing is even further tightening of the screws for the mechanisms for schools to ensure that they are giving effect to what it is that the government wants. They do not want schools giving effect to te tiriti o Waitangi. They are looking at downgrading it to the lowest possible, potentially taking into account only, if even at all.
The Waitangi Tribunal, I believe, have taken that onto consideration and have released a report in the last week around education. Could you speak to me a little bit about what the findings were from that tribunal report?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, the Waitangi Tribunal is urgently inquiring into the education reforms, particularly around that Section 127 removal for school boards, and also the curriculum redesign and refresh that is going on. However, in the process of that, at the last minute, the night before the hearing was about to begin, minutes I think before the hearing was about to begin, the Crown produced a memo to say that actually the government was considering removing further provisions, te tiriti provisions, from the legislation. As part of that treaty clause review that Paul Goldsmith had been leading and undertaking, there are several clauses, I think it's about 8 including 127, in total in the Education Act that the Crown is looking to change, that the Minister is looking to change. So that report on Friday was about those proposed changes, not the ones that have already happened, but these other ones that could happen. The report was absolutely scathing. The tribunal said it was a major breach and that it may be worse than the Treaty Principles Bill.
Wow. Oh my God. So what is Labour's plan then in this area going forward?
Our spokesperson, Ginny Anderson, recently outlined Labour's position in terms of the removal of Section 127. She has said that we will commit to that, recommit to that, because remember, it was Labour that introduced it in the first place. To simply provide for te tiriti in legislation wasn't clear enough or helpful enough. So in 2020, the provision was put in that it would be done through school boards to give effect, and here's how they would do it, and that was outlined. That's what the government has taken out. That's what we are committed to reinstating, because we believe it is important to honour te tiriti o Waitangi, that it has a place in our education system. And for Tamariki Māori, this is necessary to ensure that they get the best educational outcomes. And that's what this tribunal report is about. And that's what Labour has committed to. And in fact, I'm just about to drop my members' bill in the biscuit tin.
Nice. So finally, what do you make of Erica Stanford saying that she has done more for Māori education than any minister ever?
I only have to go on the comments that I receive from Māori within the education sector, who say that that is an absolutely crazy claim to make and statement to make. Here we are in the Waitangi Tribunal, where we are hearing from our experts telling us that the changes that the minister is making is going to be harmful for Tamariki Māori. And here we have the minister saying she's done more than any previous minister. We also have been having an exchange in the House around the changes that she has made to the curriculum, te marautanga, which is the curriculum used in our Māori immersion, Māori medium education settings. She said that not a single word had been written, not one word, zip, nil. Not true, and in fact came back and had to correct herself because in fact a lot of work had been done. What she hasn't been honest about with the public is that a huge amount of work was done on redesigning an Indigenous curriculum to replace te marautanga. It was called te tirewa, and she threw all of that out and has replaced it with her knowledge-rich science of learning, year-on-year, explicitly taught curriculum for Māori medium education. So for her to claim that she has done more than any minister ever for Māori education goes against what I'm hearing from the sector. Kura Kaupapa Māori put out a press statement around NCEA and her lack of consultation, meaningful engagement with them on that. Ngā Kura Āiwi have also put out a press release about the Waitangi Tribunal's report. So she's saying this, and yet all of those in the sector are disagreeing with her.
It's a pretty damning bit of evidence that the sector is completely disagreeing with the minister on this one. Where can people find more information on the Labour Party policy for education going forward?
So we will have more policy to share, particularly after the budget. We have made announcements already around reinstating our Healthy School Lunches program, which benefits so many tamariki. And so Chris Hipkins announced that policy earlier, as well as our position on charter schools, which we have are opposed to. And reinstating the 127 provisions on te tiriti o Waitangi. We will have more education policy to come, and follow Ginny and I, and Jan Tanetti in early childhood, and Shannon Halbert in vocational and tertiary education for those announcements.
Fantastic. Willow-Jean Prime, thank you so much for the time. Easy as that. Hopefully they weren't too stressful questions. Right. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that I'd planned to get in an expert to talk about something that had occurred this week. But so much has occurred this week, and it's actually caused a few issues with getting an expert. So I had two people lined up initially to talk around artificial intelligence, particularly the involvement of artificial intelligence in governance and the problems that you have with a machine that can't take responsibility being held accountable for incidents that occurs because it doesn't know how to take responsibility, and the massive, complicated undertaking that would involve in pulling our public service sector and the huge amounts of data that all of the government produces and putting that into an LLM that's actually going to do the job that we need it to in relation to the work that we're looking at replacing. I had somebody who wanted to talk to me specifically around the Scandinavian model that the finance minister has said that she wants to emulate, and why saying you want to do something doesn't work if you don't bring in everything that they're doing, and that's just not something the finance minister is particularly keen on. There are elements of that model she does not like, which some of her own MPs have called socialism and therefore bad. I wanted to bring somebody in to talk about the historical parallels of firing 9,000 people for modernisation uptakes, and that one fell through at the last minute as well. And then I wanted to talk to somebody specifically around the anti-trans stuff that's going through Parliament at the moment, the bigotry that New Zealand First is showing, and that individual that I was hoping to talk to had to deal with something on a personal basis. So everybody's kind of fallen through on me, which, you know, it happens from time to time. And I've got to get this out because I want to make sure I can start working on the next one. The aim is for this to become a weekly thing, and I've already delayed this by like 4 days. So I'm just going to put the video out the way it is. But before I do that, I really need you to do something for me, okay? And it's not just hit that subscribe button, it's to visit the website vote.nz. The government has changed the rules around who is eligible to vote this year, and if your enrolment details are not up to date by October 25, you don't get to vote. All right, now the Electoral Commission has estimated that could impact up to 55,000 voters this year. And we want as few number of people to be impacted by this as possible. There were 1 million people who didn't vote last year. We don't want to make it worse. Or last election, not last year. You know what I mean. It's been a long day. 4 days of trying to get this sorted, for example. So please, go to vote.nz and make sure that your details are up to date. And I don't care if you're left, right, centre, or I know on the moon when it comes to how you're going to vote. You don't get to have your say if your details aren't up to date, and it is important for everyone to have their say so that we get the most representative government out there. Right, I'll be back again next week. We'll take another look then at what's actually happened, and we'll sit down and have another chat to an MP about an issue that's cropping up. And I do actually have somebody lined up to talk to us next week as an expert for this particular area. So I guess hit that subscribe button, or don't. I guess it's up to you. I'm just a person in a room talking to a camera, asking you guys to follow me, if you can. If not, again, no stress. Until next week, guys, look after yourselves. See you later. Hey, thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. While you're here, why not hit that like button or share the video or even subscribe to the channel. You could even become a paid YouTube member so you can see things released in advance, you get access to some exclusive content, and like all these awesome people, you get to have your name at the end of the credits as well.